Would you like to master your retirement? Well, in this video, what I did was I put together a compilation of my most important topics in my most watched videos. So here in one place, in under 57 minutes, you have everything you need to know to master your retirement. So let's jump in with the first video. This guy right here might be the smartest voice on Social Security I've ever come across. His name's Tom Margeno, and he worked at the Social Security Administration for over 30 years. And so in today's video, I want to share with you some of his views on when we should file for Social Security, because it's one of the most important questions all of us face. So let's jump in. He's got a book. He's also a syndicated author in several newspapers. His book is called Social Security Simple and Smart. It's been updated for 2025. And let me just read a couple quotes from his book, and then I'll share my thoughts on it. Okay, he starts off saying, regular viewers of my newspaper column know that I tend to encourage people to file for Social Security as early as possible. Now, why is that? He goes on to say, that's because I'm an eat, drink, and be merry type of person who wants to spend my retirement income while I'm still young enough to enjoy it. So you can see why I resonate with him. But he's got more to say. It's not just one size fits all. Uh, Tom goes on to say he's also encountered too many widows over the years who have watched their husbands insist on delaying filing for Social Security only to die before ever collecting a nickel from the system. And then he has a caveat that I think is really smart. He says, however, any good financial advisor would tell you that I'm wrong. He or she would strongly recommend that you delay filing for benefits as long as possible. And we're going to talk about that juxtaposition, that challenge, that balance that we all have to do. He goes on to say, this is because statistically, you are going to live long enough beyond age 66 or 70 to recoup the benefits you would lose by not taking early retirement. Okay, I want to share with you my views on that because it's really important. And then Tom also has an article that he's published that I want to share with you. But before I do, I want to introduce you to one other person. His name's Ari Parker, and Ari might be the smartest person I know when it comes to Medicare. We're going to get back to Social Security, but Medicare is also super important. Ari wrote a book called It's Not That Complicated: The 3 Medicare Decisions to Protect Your Health and Money. Just like Social Security is an enormously important decision, so is Medicare. And that's why I'm proud to partner with the sponsor of today's video, Chapter. In addition to being an author, Ari is also one of the co-founders of Chapter, and they help people make good decisions regarding their Medicare decisions, both when they first start off for Medicare, but then also each year afterwards to make sure that they have the right Medicare plan. Why is this important? Because according to Fidelity, the average 65-year-old is looking at $165,000 over the remaining of their lifetime on medical costs that are not covered by Medicare, or they're above and beyond. There's some really important decisions that we need to make. And I encourage you to work with a Medicare advisor. I'm not a Medicare advisor, but I encourage you to work with a Medicare advisor, and specifically with somebody that's going to put your interest in front of their own, somebody that's not going to just push you for whatever plan pays the highest commission. And that's why I'm proud to sponsor with Chapter. They don't do that. They put your interest first. In fact, I want to quickly share with you a comment that I got from one of my viewers who called Chapter, and then we'll get back to Social Security. But this comment is, Chapter, I'm pleasantly surprised. I called thinking they would just try to push hard on some Advantage plan. The guy did not. He actually said that original Medicare and the supplements were my best choice. I'm not sure how he, Chapter, makes any money off of that advice, but their street cred sure goes up with me because I didn't get the expected car sales guide type pitch. If you don't want the car sales guide type pitch, I urge you to reach out to Chapter at this phone number here, or reach out to them at this QR code here. Okay, let's go back to the other big decision we all face at one time, which is Social Security. We're coming back to Tom Marginal, and he wrote an article here where he really, the title of it gives the premise of the whole thing, and that is there are no magic answers when it comes to Social Security. It's about making the best decision you can with the information, with the data you have available. Let's look at a couple of his comments from this article. You can see it was, as I record this, it was just published a couple weeks ago, June 18, 2025. And Tom goes on to say, there's probably no question I'm asked more often than some version of this. When should I file for Social Security? To answer it, many people prepare spreadsheets, they construct matrices, they buy books, they consult financial planners, and who knows, maybe they even get in touch with mystics, palm readers, and other charlatans. He goes on to say, what they seem to be looking for is a magic answer. They want to believe there's some secret formula that, if they only knew it, would guide them to pick the absolute perfect age to start their Social Security benefits. And he goes on to say there is no magic answer, but there is good decision making. I'm going to share with you some things that I think about. But he starts off with, to help you make that decision, think about a couple things. The first is your health. If you're active and robust and you think you'll be kicking when you're in your 90s, then it might be best to wait until 70 to file for benefits, because you're going to be around long enough to really reap the benefits of that higher monthly payment. On the other hand, if you're like me, this is Tom talking, and came out on the short end of the longevity gene pool, neither his dad nor any of his uncles lived until age 60, then it might make sense to file for Social Security as soon as you're eligible. And what about your financial well-being? Now, like I said, I think Tom is one of the smartest voices on Social Security, but with this one, I disagree with him. Let's see what he says. Tom says, if you're doing well and have other sources of income, meaning your Social Security check is just frosting on the retirement cake, then maybe you should start benefits early. But if Social Security is going to be your primary source of income in retirement, then you might want to maximize those benefits by starting them later. So let's talk about the frosting on the cake. If you don't need the benefits, Tom, and it's just frosting on the cake, Tom says, then maybe you should start your benefits early. It's just frosting on the cake. You don't need it. My pushback would be, what if something happens? What if something changes? One of the nice things about Social Security is, with rare exception, it cannot be taken away from us. So it is a form of longevity insurance. It is a form of, what if something happens in life? What if you or your spouse or one of your adult children go through a horrible situation in life and it drains you of all these resources that you're looking at now and saying, I really don't need Social Security. If that were me, nothing I'm sharing in today's video is advice, financial advice. I don't know your situation, but if I did not need the money in order to live a better life now, if it was just frosting on the cake, as Tom says, then I would wait as long as possible, just in case something unexpected happens or I end up living a lot longer than I thought. I want to thank Chapter again for sponsoring this video. I urge you to reach out to them using this QR code or call them at this phone number. And if you like this video, the YouTube algorithm says this is the next video of mine, specifically for you, that you should think about watching next. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye. I retired about 9 months ago myself, and before that I was a financial advisor for over 20 years. And this is my honest advice to anyone working past 55 years old. And frankly, this is why I started my YouTube channel, was to share this message. And that is to be careful. These next 10 years between 55 and 65 are super important. They're what I call the youth of your senior years. And we all need to be thoughtful and deliberate about how we spend that time. Yes, if you keep working, to 55 to 60 to 65, you'll have more money than if you quit working at 59 or 62. But it's not just about your bank account. It's also about optimizing your life. It's about squeezing all the juice out of what I call the youth of your senior years and having as much fun as you can. Because unfortunately, at some point, most of us are going to lose our health before we turn 80 years old. There are some, but there's not many 80-year-olds that don't have serious health issues, that haven't slowed down a little bit. We all know some, but we also know a lot of people that unfortunately have had a heart attack, have had a stroke, have had a cancer diagnosis, and they cannot do the things that they could have done between 55 and 65. So is early retirement for everybody? Absolutely not. But do you want to be thoughtful and deliberate and look back when you're 80 and saying, I'm really happy with how I spent my time. I squeezed all that juice out of life while I could, while I had my health, while it was easy to travel, while it was easy to learn maybe a new sport, learn to surf or take up road cycling and get a new group of friends. So I urge you to be thoughtful and deliberate on this time. Too many of us just cruise through that period, right? Here in the United States, the default is we retire at 65. So many of us never think about, gee, do I have enough money that I could retire now? Do I want to continue working? And be careful, because as a financial advisor, I knew the families I worked with really, really well. And there was a theme where people would say, the stress is getting harder. It's not as much fun at work anymore. Hey, Azul, when can I retire? And because there was such a strong stock market over the last 30 years, many people reached that point in their 50s instead of their 60s. It was a unique time. But interestingly and surprising to me is when folks that I knew did not love their job reached the point that they could retire, it was really hard for them to pull the trigger, and many did not pull the trigger. And one of the advantages of being a financial advisor is we get to learn not just from our own lives, but from the lives of the hundreds of clients that we work with. And many of those folks that could have retired at 55, at 59, at 62, went on later and unfortunately lost their health and regretted not taking advantage of that time. So I want to encourage you to think about, what is the 65-year-old version of yourself going to say? What is the 70 and the 75 and the 80-year-old version of yourself? My name's Azul. Let's say your name's John or Susie. What is the John or Susie that has lost their health? What is that person going to say? And how might that person give you advice on what to do? Now, we can optimize on our bank account, and obviously we're going to have more money if we work right up until the day that we die. But none of us want that. And the decision on when we retire is complicated. And we need to think about the different factors. Definitely you want to be sure that you have enough money, that you're not going to run out of money. You're not going to have to worry about running out of money. But how much is that? Very few people know how much that is to have that confidence. If you work with a financial advisor is going to say, they're going to do something called the Monte Carlo simulation. They're going to ask you, what are your expenses? What does retirement look like to you? And they're going to run this statistical tool that'll give you a probability of success. And they'll say, you have an 85% likelihood of never running out of money during your lifetime. You have a 95%. And understand that there's all kinds of unknowns in that forecast, right? The tax rates are a huge unknown. Inflation is a huge unknown. What type of return we're going to get in the stock market is an unknown. How long we're going to live is an unknown. Heck, we don't even know what income tax rates are going to be in 12 months, in 2026. Right now, the Trump tax cuts are set to expire. Is that going to be extended? Is that not? And taxes are a big piece. So know that when you work with a financial advisor, it's based on a lot of assumptions. And I think working with a financial advisor is the gold standard. But I also know that many people are never going to work with a financial advisor. And for those folks, I urge it not to use an Excel spreadsheet, to not use Google Sheets. It's just too easy to make a mistake. There is software that's designed for people like you and I that want to come up with our own financial plan. There's several different providers of that. The software that I like is called Bolden. It used to be called New Retirement. If you look in the show description, you'll see a link that will support the channel. This video is not sponsored by Bolden, but I am an affiliate, so you'll be supporting the channel. So look for that link if you're interested. It's very affordable. As I record this, it's $120 a year to get that, and I believe they have a free 2-week trial. So one is your financial plan. Are you sure that you're not going to run out of money? And the reality, the truth is you're never sure. You're never 100% sure. But what I would caution you is, if you do the analysis and it says you have an 85% likelihood, an 80% likelihood of never running out of money, yes, the gold standard is 95 or 97% or 99% likelihood of never running out of money. But that comes with a cost. And so understanding that an 85% likelihood of never running out of money means there's only a 15% chance that you're going to have to tweak things, right? We're not going to fly that plane down to the ground if we find out, unfortunately the stock market's not doing well, and maybe we have to spend less, or maybe we need to take a part-time job, or do consulting back to the firm that we retired from. But that's a 15% or a 20% likelihood. But if you give up another 5 years of your life to raise that certainty to 95, 97, 99%, that's 100% likely that you're giving up those 5 years. So my message is to be thoughtful, to be deliberate, to do what's right for you. I'm not saying you should retire early, but I urge you to not cruise on autopilot through the youth of your senior years, and to be thoughtful and deliberate, and to think about what does 80-year-old, 75-year-old you advise you to do now if you're under 65 about when to retire. And if you like videos on this where I focus on making good decisions, the YouTube algorithm says this is the next video of mine that you should watch. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye. Unfortunately, I suspect I will not be making many friends with this video. But as a financial advisor, these are honestly 5 things that I found that as people are approaching retirement, it probably makes sense to think about selling. And the first one is planes, trains, and automobiles, expensive toys. And why do I say expensive toys? When we're working, we don't have a lot of free time. So if we've got a boat, if you've got your pilot license and you like flying, if you've got a 4-wheeler that you like going out in the desert with, we don't have as much time to do things. So it's important that we make the most out of the time that we have. And I'm glad you're using your vacation and you've got these toys that you enjoy using. Over half of Americans don't even use their vacation. So that's the good thing. But as we get closer to retirement, these are expensive to maintain, particularly if you've got an expensive car, if you've got a sports car. You worked hard for 20, 30, 40 years, and you finally felt like, you could afford a expensive sports car. And I'm glad. I'm not telling you how to spend your money. I'm just giving you a heads up that as you look at your retirement budget, things like that may add an extra $1,000 a month, an extra $2,000 a month, an extra $3,000 a month, whatever it is for the maintenance and everything else that goes into maintaining that vehicle, that toy that you enjoy using. And you know what? $500 a month can make a difference in your retirement plan. So work with a professional, work with somebody that can help you budget things. But let me go through the list of 5 things and I'll come back to that concept. Okay, so that was the first one, the expensive toys. The next one, and there's going to be something here for everybody to dislike. So if you're married and you and your spouse are watching this, you're going to be nudging your spouse on one of them and your spouse will be nudging you on the other one. So the next one is expensive depreciating assets. And probably the biggest one I've already talked about, expensive toys. But probably the most common one for retirees, and again, this is going to be controversial, so here we go, I'll grab that third rail, but think about the RV. Recreational vehicles, the RV, and traveling around the United States. I want you to live your biggest adventures. I want you to pursue your dreams. The challenge with an RV is it's an expensive depreciating asset. So just like you've heard me say, just like with cars, buying a new car versus buying a really good used car. I think it's the same thing with an RV. And if you do decide to buy a used car, or even not a used car, a used RV, or even a new RV, boy, be sure to have a pre-purchase done on it. Because there's some YouTube channels where people talk about RVs, and I just retired 6 months ago, so that's why I'm watching these videos, because that's part of my retirement plan as well. But where I've come out on this, and also putting my financial advisor hat back on, where I've come out on this is, boy, if you can buy a good, solid, used RV that doesn't have a lot of miles on it, there's all kinds of stories on YouTube about people taking off in an RV for their big trip, brand new, leaving the factory and breaking down 500 miles or 1,000 miles down the road. And according to these channels, it's not like you can just say, hey, this was a bad RV. I didn't even get 1,000 miles. I want my money back, or I want a different one. Apparently, it's quite hard to do that. And the warranties are complicated because they're conversions. So maybe it's a problem with the engine, or the problem with the frame and the converter built onto it. Anyways, it gets complicated. So in many ways, a used RV that doesn't have a lot of miles, that's been well maintained, that you can get a really solid pre-purchase on, might even be a better buy for you than a new one. But just be careful. I think where I've landed is, boy, these things are expensive to rent. But my wife and I, we're going to rent an RV first. We're going to try it for a week or two. And it kills me to spend that kind of money on renting them. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to stay in a nice hotel than in an RV. But like a lot of people, when we retire, we just want that experience. But for the sake of this video, the 5 things to think about selling. If you have an expensive depreciating asset, if you're retired, you've done the RV thing, and it's just parked somewhere and you're not using it, think about selling it, because that can be an expensive luxury. And we're going to get back to how this impacts your financial plan at the end. Okay, the next one is if you have a large home or a second home. Once the kids leave for college, if you have kids and then they're out on their own, do you really need that 3,000 square foot home or larger? Could you downsize to 2,000 square feet to 1,500 square feet? I'm not saying to do it, but owning a home that has a lot more rooms than what you need is really expensive, right? And in retirement, it's nice to own your house. But think about, the size of your house, the value of your house. First off, it's an illiquid asset, so you don't have that as money that you can spend in retirement. But a home is also expensive to maintain. And I don't know about you, but not only is it expensive to maintain, but it's getting harder to even find people to come to maintain that house. So, a smaller home that maybe has a lower value, so your property tax is lower. Hopefully your insurance on that home. Property insurance is just skyrocketing. We talked about expensive toys. We talked about depreciating assets. Boy, the insurance on those toys, on those products is really expensive. Same thing with your home, same thing with your second home. So if the kids are gone and you can downsize and you don't need that size, what my wife and I do is we'll rent a place when friends come, and sometimes we'll even help offset the costs of that for our friends. If we don't have a lot of room in our house. If it's a couple not coming with their kids, fine. But if it's a couple coming with 2 teenage kids, it's going to be pretty crowded in our house. So, we're likely to share with them, here's some nice Airbnbs nearby. Here's a reasonably priced hotel nearby. So just give some thought, because it's expensive to keep, to heat, to pay the electric bill, the air conditioning bill, the gas bill for a large home, the property taxes, the insurance, etc. Okay, enough said. Same thing with the second home. Why do you want a second home when you're retired? You can go to a lot of different places. Maybe you do, but maybe a better example than a second home, although, two of my rules for building wealth is one spouse in one house. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek with the one house. Also, I say that tongue in cheek with the spouse too, wink, wink. But it is expensive to get divorced, right? And relationships, it takes a lifetime to build the kind of relationship that you can have with your spouse. But let me move on to the house thing. The one house, when you're retired, some people like to have that second home, but when you're retired, one of the nice things is you can go places for 2, 3, 4 weeks. You don't have to just go for a week. You don't have to go for just 5 days. So maybe instead of a second home, using an Airbnb or using another platform to find a nice place to stay as opposed to being locked in. And I think the classic example of that is item number 4 in this list, which is a timeshare. I think when you're working, a timeshare can be a good thing. Again, we don't have a lot of time. So making it easy to travel, making it easy to have a place that your family can gather. If your kids are grown, they have young children, when your grandkids are young, they don't have a really strong opinion on where they're going. But as they get older, the grandkids may not want to go to the same place. Your adult kids may not want to go to the same place as their kids get older, and it gets easier for them to travel. So another thing to think about, selling, they're hard to sell. But if time is on your side, think about selling it and try to sell it on your own. There's rules that have to be followed with timeshares. But frankly, if you sell it back to the timeshare, you're probably not going to do very well. But enough on that. I said that there were 5 things. I said that there was something controversial for everybody. And I also said we were going to come back to the financial plan. So let me skip over number 5 quickly. Number 5 is I want you to sell that attitude of, I want to help my adult children as much as I can. They have loans to buy their first home. There's loans for them to go back to grad school. They're called student loans. The loan for their home is called a mortgage. But you know what they don't have loans for? They don't have loans for retirement. So if you can afford to help your kids and you want to do that and it doesn't put your retirement at jeopardy, great. It's your money, you worked hard for it. But if you're going to put your retirement funds at jeopardy, or you're going to have to postpone your retirement, unfortunately, if you're 60 years old, you likely have less than 1,000 weeks of healthy active time. I want to see you take full advantage of the youth of your senior years. So don't put that at risk, either retiring early or retirement security, to help out your kids that probably can help themselves in most cases. Okay, as far as your financial plan, why do I mention these things as a financial advisor? Unfortunately, if you go to a financial advisor and you say, I want to spend $8,000 a month, a little more than that, I want to spend $100,000 a year. If you end up spending $1,000 more a month than that, that can change things on your financial planning. I've seen where $500 a month can change things. So these unexpected expenses that are associated with these things, the extra $500, the extra $1,000 in fees or maintenance, those can make a difference. So I want you to enjoy retirement as much as possible. And I also want you to have the confidence and the security that comes from knowing that you're going to be okay. You have enough money to retire. So that's why I mentioned that. I mentioned earlier about when you retire and not giving up a couple years of retirement to help the kids. That's why I made this video up here. Why waiting to 65 to retire might be a big mistake. If you haven't seen it, I urge you to watch it. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you in the next one. Once you turn 55, these are 7 things you should never disclose to anyone. And the first one is your net worth. That's nobody's business outside of you and your spouse, you and your partner. And you don't want to be sharing that with anybody. And it's similar to number 2, which is your salary. Because when you share your net worth, when you share your salary, there's always somebody that's going to go away disappointed, either you or the person that you shared it with. Now, I've been a financial advisor. I'm now retired, but for 20 years. So I've been inside the room when people share this information. And with a financial advisor, you need to share that. But I know that different people have shared with me stories where they told their neighbors, they told their friends, they told a family member what their net worth is. And, oh, you're worth more than me. Or, oh, you make more than me. You should help me. I got in a car accident. You should be happy to pay this because you make so much more than me. So there's really no upside to sharing that information unless it's your financial advisor, your accountant, an attorney, something like that. Okay, number 3, kind of obvious, but I'm going to share it, your passwords. And there are password managers, and unfortunately, too many of us reuse our passwords. So let's say, you have a friend that you need to help you out on something. Boy, really do what you can to not have them log into your account, to not share your password, particularly if you reuse your passwords. There are password managers. They're very affordable. They're $4, $5, $6 a month, something like this. It does take time to get used to using a password manager, and you can share passwords and not allow that person to see the password using these password managers. In addition to protecting your passwords, another thing that I want you to think about is the importance of your online privacy, which is why I'm happy to have Delete Me sponsoring this video. I recently did an online search on myself, and what I found shocked me. How much of my personally identifiable information was easily found online. My phone numbers, family connections, past jobs, and more. So the question is, how did these sites get my information? And they bought it from data brokers. So data brokers collect information on us from various public sources, and then they collect profiles on us that include the information that I found online. And they sell this information to anyone willing to pay for it, which is marketers, businesses, and even scammers pretending to be legitimate businesses. So imagine getting a call from a scammer that already knows your past address, your family member names, your old cell phone numbers. They could sound very, very convincing. In fact, a few days ago, something similar to this happened to me. While I was checking out of my Airbnb, I had my suitcase on the sidewalk, and frankly, I forgot to put my suitcase in my car. And after I left, someone found the suitcase out on the sidewalk by itself, so they called the police, and the police called me. And they had information on me, right? They had my name, they had my phone number, because all of that was inside of the suitcase. And could have been a scam. Fortunately for me, it was not a scam. But all of this information, if somebody wanted to pretend that they were a police officer, all of this information is readily available online. And you know what? It would sound super convincing. And that is why we all need a service like Delete Me. Delete Me is a done-for-you subscription service that identifies and removes our personally identifiable information from hundreds of data broker websites. And the process could not be easier for people like us. We simply submit our information to Delete Me, and then their team handles the removal process for us. After a few days, Delete Me sends you your first report showing you the information that they found and removed. And what I love about Delete Me is they don't stop there. They're continuously monitoring these sites and new sites as they appear. Delete Me repeats the removal process over and over for you. And unfortunately, it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole. And Delete Me has to keep on top of all of these brokers to be sure that our data is removed, and then they stop the next data broker as well. Delete Me's report to you shows which sites had your data, what specific information they found about you, your phone numbers, your details, relatives, property, etc. And they also tell you how many hours it would have taken us to do this data removal process ourselves. And when you look at how many hours that you saved, you can see that Delete Me's subscription price is a bargain. Get 20% off Delete Me consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/Azul and you use the promo code Azul at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/Azul and code Azul. No service can make us completely invisible online, but the Delete Me will materially reduce your personal information from data broker sites where it's commonly bought and sold. Thank you again to Delete Me for sponsoring this video.
Okay, the next one is something that I've seen people use professionally, and there are times where you have to use it, but be super careful. And that is giving somebody a power of attorney, even a family member, right? So a power of attorney would allow somebody to make financial interactions to bind you in your absence without your permission. And so, yes, if you lost your ability to think and to make rational decisions, you're going to need somebody to be able to do that. But outside of that, be very, very careful. You can make it where it's a springing power of attorney, where you say, okay, I'm going to have my son or my daughter be my power of attorney, but they first need to get a physician to say that I can't make decisions like this on my own. Now, there's pros and cons of that. It can make things more complicated when you need help. But be very careful. I have heard of stories, fortunately not my clients, but professionally in my industry, I've heard of stories where even family members abuse that. And in some cases, you know, they dad gets sick, mom signs over the power of attorney to one of the kids, and the kids abuse that, and now mom is left waiting for the kid to do the right thing by mom, and sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. It goes both ways. I just used one gender example, but be very careful with power of attorneys. Also, be very careful with past skeletons. You know, if when you were in high school, mea culpa, you did some stupid things, nobody else needs to know about those things. You know, if they're harmless little stories, great. But if they're things that might have landed you in the back of a police car, or you look at now and you're ashamed of it, uh, again, mea culpa, right? Nobody needs to know what those are. So, you know, there's nothing to be gained by sharing that. Sometimes you feel like you deepen a relationship with somebody by being candid, by being open, but there's other parts of your life that you can be candid and open against. And, you know, my fear, and unfortunately, I've seen this both in my personal life and in my professional life, where people use that moment of openness against you. And the next three get increasingly more sensitive. So the next one is your self-doubts. You know, sharing with people your self-doubts. Now, maybe on a personal level you share some of those, but not somebody at work, because the reality is, you know, work is a combat sport, right? It's a high impact sport. And in some regards, you're competing with your colleagues for the next promotion. And I have seen this play out at work, where somebody uses information that they have against somebody to disqualify them for a promotion, to get their boss to have second doubts about them, and to put themselves in a better position. So be super, super careful when you share that information. And the next one's a big one. And that is, if you have any mental health illnesses or situations, be super careful who you share that with. It can, in some states, it can actually disqualify you from certain jobs. So be careful with that. You certainly don't want to give that power to somebody else in your life. Treat that, you know, maybe a spouse needs to know about that. Maybe a family member that might be impacted needs to know about that, but hold that information tight. And the next one is be careful sharing information about people that you really dislike, and particularly people that unfortunately it might actually raise to a level of, you actually hate a certain person. And if that happens, there's very little to be gained by sharing that. You may say that, this isn't my favorite person, or I don't like hanging with this person. But to share that you actively dislike somebody or hate them, that can come back and bite you, and this is just life advice. Being 60 years old now, and speaking of life advice, the things that come back to bite you often, we have good intentions, we have good hearts, but people are complicated, and sometimes it can circle back in ways that you and I can't think about ahead of time, but yet it plays out, and once it plays out, we've given somebody, oftentimes unintentionally, power over us that we didn't need to do. So if that's your situation, just be careful sharing this information, because the world is small, and time, a lot of things can happen over a period of time, and things that maybe we even forgot about sharing with our friends. Now, I'm a very open and transparent person. I tell my wife, I tell my friends, I have no secrets. You may not like what I'm doing today. You may not like what I'm planning on doing, but you're welcome to know that. But even then, there are things that I think are best left unsaid. It's like when, a friend asks you, "Hey, does this pair of pants, does this dress make my butt look big?" We all know the answer to that. And, it's "Oh, I like that color," or whatever, but you're not gonna directly answer it. And this falls into a similar situation because it can bite us, and it can hurt us in unexpected ways. Maybe your friend that's a mortgage broker, doesn't get you the best deal, or get you a higher rate, or, doesn't fight to get your loan approved. And we want as many people as possible rooting for our success. We want to root for their success. And so those are the things I don't think we should disclose to anybody.
If you enjoyed this video, you should watch my next video on why you should not wait to 65 to retire next. And don't forget to check out my sponsor, Delete Me, using the link in the description to get 20% off of your subscription to Delete Me. I just retired a couple months ago at the age of 59, and one of the big surprises to me is, candidly, I'm kind of avoiding people. And I want to chat about why I think that is, and also get your thoughts about it in the comments. So, when I was working, I had a job that I loved. It was easy for me. I found it very rewarding. But frankly, I was in front of people almost all day long. 8 hours a day I was in front of people, meeting with people, talking with people on the phone, either in a conference room, or out at lunch, or at breakfast, or over a coffee. And frankly, one of the surprises of my retirement is, some people, when they first retire, they say, they felt like they had to sleep a little bit more than normal to kind of catch up on their sleep. I didn't have that, but what I am having is this feeling like, I want my time. And I think because for almost 25 years, I was in front of people, and I had a role I had to play. And that role was dictated by the calendar. It was dictated by my day schedule. It was dictated by the clock. And I think me avoiding people right now, early in my retirement, is a reaction to that. It's just me kind of recovering from that. And so, as I look at retirement, it was a hard decision for me to retire. For those of you that are regular viewers of my channel, I'm a fan of people retiring in their 50s as opposed to their mid to late 60s. And the reason is, life is short. And unfortunately, this is the last chapter that we have in our lives where we have our physical strength, where we have our mental acuity, where we have the ability to go do the things that we've always said, you know, someday I want to do this, someday I want to do that. So I'm a fan of that. But frankly, it was hard for me to retire because I enjoyed my job. I was good at it. I liked my company. I liked the people that I worked with. I was well paid. And for all of those reasons, it was hard for me to retire. But I got to tell you, you know, 3-4 months into retirement now, it feels really good. But like I said, I do find that, you know, I want my time, and I'm kind of avoiding. I'm a very outgoing person. I love meeting people. I love hearing other people's stories and finding out what motivates them and what their goals are. And, you know, maybe if I can be helpful in that, I love being able to talk to them about that. But I'm kind of finding right now I kind of need my me time. And this, frankly, my YouTube channel is my way of kind of giving back and being part of society in a more meaningful way. But outside of my YouTube channel and outside of my immediate family, I'm finding I want my time. You know, there's 168 hours in a week. And when I was working, obviously I didn't get all 168 hours a week, right? I had to give my company 40, 50 hours a week of that, plus probably toss on another 10 hours just getting ready for work and coming back. So of that 168 hours, you know, I lost 50 of those, so now I'm down to 118, and then you sleep, let's say, another 60, and that leaves you about 60 hours a week. And, you know, one of my big takeaways, not just the surprise that I've shared with you, that I'm not as active meeting people and frankly kind of avoiding people. But outside of that, my big surprise is I want all of these 168 hours a week. I want them all. I want to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I didn't fully appreciate that when I was working. It's just how enjoyable it is to have control of the full 168 hours a week, as opposed to giving up, you know, roughly half of the waking time to my company and to the goals of my company, even though I was on board with those goals. I enjoyed those goals. I enjoy, it was kind of a part of my purpose, right, is trying to achieve things and helping the company achieve their goals. But yeah, I've really, really enjoyed having control of the full 168 hours as opposed to having to share those. And I'm curious, from your standpoint, if you've retired, you know, what are the changes that you have seen? Again, for me, it's that I tend to enjoy my me time right now. I think that's just a temporary thing. I do have clients. I have friends that have retired, and oftentimes, you know, they say that they needed to sleep more for the first 6 months of retirement. Oftentimes, there's people that have put off being able to travel, being able to do other big adventures, and so they're focusing on that early on. And so I think my situation is similar to that. And I think it's normal, and I think it's healthy. You know, having been a financial advisor for over 20 years, I think it's important that we hit the ground running. As I record this, I'm literally just back in the United States, a little over 24 hours. I spent a month in Guatemala. You also saw that I was in New York City for half a month before that. So, you know, I've been gone for a month and a half, either in New York City or in Guatemala, just doing some adventures that I've always wanted to do. I've always enjoyed New York City. My wife says she'd divorce me if you know, I asked her to move to New York City, and I wouldn't do that, but I think it would be fun to live in New York City for a year or 2 years. And so I had a chance to go there for half a month. And I'm glad I did that. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice time of year to be in New York City, So I think it's important for all of us to hit the ground running. None of us know how long we're going to have right now. You know, I'm healthy. Right now I'm fit. Right now I think I'm all there. I have my full mental acuity. So it's important we do that. And it's also important, and this is super hard, that, you know, we transition from being a saver into being a spender. And that's hard for me. That's hard for anybody to transition into. But I think it's really, really important because, you know, it's not just retiring, it's not just getting your freedom, but it's investing in yourself. It's spending the money to do the things that you've said, you know, someday I'm going to do this, someday I want to do that. Well, someday, you know, we're running out of some days. Unfortunately, at 60 years old, most of us have less than 1,000 weeks of healthy, active time remaining, and that's not a lot of some days in front of us. So not only do we need access to those days, but we need to be willing to spend. And for somebody like me, who frankly has been a good saver, been a good investor my whole life, that's a big transition to switch from being a saver to being a spender. And one of the things we can do to prepare for that is we can start using that spending muscle before we retire. I think if we wait until we retire to start trying to spend money, to start doing some of these things that we've been sacrificing, it can be hard. And that's why I made this video up here, which are 8 things to stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy your journey until you retire. I'll see you in it. One of the most important secrets to becoming financially independent sooner in your life rather than later, and have the flexibility and the freedom that comes with financial independence, one of the most important secrets to get there is to look poor. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the first thing is, it doesn't matter how much we earn each year. Yes, it's nice to earn more money, but what really matters is how much we can save. Over half of the people in the United States making $100,000 a year or more say that they save nothing every year. And if you're going to save nothing every year, you know, maybe travel the world and take on odd jobs and have adventures in your life. But if we're going to go to work every day, if we're going to have all the responsibilities in our lives, let's look back on the previous 12 months and say, okay, I made progress towards the day where I have a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom. So the first thing about looking poor is it allows us to save money, and it allows us to avoid the temptation of keeping up with the Joneses and having lifestyle creep. Every time we get a raise, having that temptation that we're going to spend more money. And even worse, we're going to spend more money using debt or credit card debt, as opposed to paying for things that we can afford when we can afford them and saving up for those special things. Okay, point number 2. So that was financial. I apologize for the noise in the background. I'm at a park and there's some people doing some work here. The second one is really not financial. The second reason it's important to look poor is I think it makes it easier to attract your tribe. People that are like you, people that you are going to vibe with, as opposed to maybe, you know, going outside of your circle that are really your true friends and the people that you like, and to try hanging out with people that are spending more money. Particularly, most people that watch my channel, you know, we tend to be a little frugal by nature. And so we don't want to keep up with the Joneses, and B, maybe the Joneses are not our natural tribe, the people that we would want to be around. So, you know, here I am, I'm in New York City, and I'm, you know, wearing a comfortable sweatshirt today, and I'm recording at a park. And I'm more likely to attract my tribe and the type of people I like hanging out with, as opposed to, you know, being on Fifth Avenue and doing the expensive shopping and things that just is not me. Okay, the third one I think is by living within your means, by looking poor, I think it opens the door to more adventures. I'll give you, for instance, I like to travel. During the pandemic, I was fortunate. I was able to work remotely from several different countries. And when I travel now, one of the things that I try to do is I try to occasionally take public transportation. Here in New York, I'm taking the subway. Of course, most people take the subway. But when I was in Peru, or I was in Colombia, or I was in Mexico or Southeast Asia, I would try to take the public transit, and frankly, it opened the door for me to interact more with just the general public. And one of the things I enjoy doing is traveling like a local in a foreign country. So I like experiencing what life is like for a local. So by me not renting a car and putting up with all the hassles and headaches, for instance, here in New York City, I don't want to rent a car, right? It's expensive to park that car, but frankly, it's a lot quicker to get around on foot or by taking the public transportation. So by living within our means, I think it opens the door to more adventures, and it opens the door to us, again, on the previous point, interacting more with our tribe and being able to make friends with people that are in our tribe. Okay, number 4. And this piece of wisdom, yes, I've been a financial advisor for over 20 years, but this piece of wisdom came from one of my favorite singers, Sheryl Crow, and she has a song that's called Soak Up the Sun, and in that, she has a lyric that says, it's not having what you want, it's wanting what you have. And she says that this brings you happiness, and I think those are extremely wise words, and even though I'm chuckling, I think singers are some of the best writers of our generation. They have some really wise words hidden in the lyrics of their song. And I think that's true both for stuff, right? It's not having what we want, but it's wanting what we have. I think that's true for stuff, and it's also true for people, with our friends, with our spouse, with the people that are closest behind us. It's about choosing wisely who we choose to spend time with, and then, occasionally pruning people out of our lives that don't help us be the type of person that we want to be. And if somebody is constantly pressuring you to spend money that you don't want to spend, to go on, expensive shopping sprees and stuff like that, if that's not you, if that's you, that's fine. But if that's not you, pruning those people out. So why is it important to look poor? I think it helps us appreciate what we have, because we're not constantly seeking that dopamine hit of buying something new. Okay, and the 5th one, and perhaps one of the most important reasons to look poor, is it gives you a lot of flexibility in options, both today as well as tomorrow. Now, what do I mean by that? If I keep my living expenses low, that gives me a lot of flexibility today as I go through my journey of life to take the type of job that I want to take, because I have the flexibility to do it, to maybe regroup, and maybe after 10 years in a career, if you decide, what, I want to do something else. Well, if you've kept your living expenses low, you have that flexibility to do that. Where if you're living beyond your means, it's really easy to get trapped and to not have that flexibility today, as well as to not have that flexibility in the future. Maybe when you're in your 50s, when you're in what I call the youth of your senior years, you may not have the flexibility to retire earlier, because you may not have been able to save as much as you need to in order to retire. And frankly, your retirement might be quite a bit more expensive, because as a financial advisor, one of the first things I look at with a family when they say, do I have enough to retire? It really comes down, and it's driven by your expenses first. What does retirement look like for you? What are those expenses? So it gives you flexibility and it gives you options both today as well as later on in life. And if you like this video, I think you're gonna like this video up here where it's kind of part 2 to this video, which is 8 things to stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy your journey more. That video has over 700,000 views. I think you'll enjoy it as well. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.
Unfortunately, it took me about 60 years to learn the 6 things that I'm going to share with you over the next about 6 minutes. And the first one is to stop pretending. To stop pretending that we're somebody that we're not. And just be comfortable with who we are, both the strengths and the weaknesses with that. And just to embrace that. There's going to be people that love our quirky personality. There's going to be people that don't love our quirky personality. But that's okay. There's plenty of people that are going to vibe with us. So that's number 1. Number 2 is kind of related. Number 2 can get quite expensive if you don't cut it out sooner rather than later. In fact, it's what I see, having been a financial advisor for over 20 years. It's what I see is probably the number 1 thing that derails people's ability to retire at 65 or hopefully even sooner. And that is stop keeping up with the Joneses. This need to have an image, this need, your neighbor buys a nice car, you want a nicer car, even though you already have a nice car. Your neighbor moves to a neighborhood down the street that gets his kids into a slightly better school zone. And all of a sudden you want the same thing. And these are all fine things to want and to do if it's what you want. But if we're doing it because we want to keep up with the Joneses, that can get expensive really quickly. And I find it doesn't bring me joy, which brings me to the 3rd item on my list. And that is stuff doesn't bring me joy. What does bring me joy is relationships and experiences. As I record this, I'm in Costa Rica. I'm at this beautiful location. I'm having a great time. It's a surfing town called Santa Teresa. And it's just a lot of fun to be here. And so this brings me a lot more joy than, I don't care how much of that stuff comes in the cardboard boxes on our front porch. Stuff doesn't bring us joy. In fact, I'm at a phase in my life, and I suspect many of you are at this phase as well, where I want less stuff in my life. I don't want a big house anymore. I don't want a fancy car. I don't want anything that can break. I want to simplify my life. I want to focus on spending the time I have left, and hopefully I have 20 plus years left, but I want to focus that time on doing things that bring joy to me and bring joy to people that I love. And, it's kind of related to not keeping up with the Joneses and not pretending. And, so much of that stuff when we're younger that we chase is to impress other people. In fact, even doing a trip like this, a lot of people are posting this on their Instagram or on their Facebook. You know how many how many images I've posted on Facebook or Instagram about me being in Costa Rica? 0. I may eventually post 1 or 2, but frankly, it's a security risk to tell people where you're at and if you're not at home. So that can be a negative. Having stuff is no longer a positive for it. And the biggest badge of honor that I have is if I can help out people's lives that I care about, specifically my 2 daughters, my immediate family, both the family I grew up in as well as the family that I raised, for my spouse, people like that. But the other badge of honor is taking care of my health. It's one of those things that's so easy to postpone. And whether that's my mental health or my physical health. And frankly, I'm better at doing things to protect my physical health than I am my mental health. I know people that have routines that make a difference, that
they do a pre-bedtime routine, they do a shutdown routine, they do a gratitude journal. I need to start doing those things, so mea culpa with that. When it comes to the physical fitness, it's the same thing. We can postpone it for a day or two, we can postpone it for a week or two, but if we postpone it for too long, then it ends up having a long-term impact on us that we're likely gonna regret later in our lives. And, I don't wanna regret that. I wanna squeeze all the juice out of every day that God's gonna give me here on this earth and to have as many adventures, and to do that, I need my health. And my health is much more important than my wealth. And I'm trying to optimize on enjoyment in life. I'm trying to optimize on adventure. I'm trying to optimize on relationships. And I'm trying to optimize on my health. And so that's the next thing that I've had to learn the hard way. It's super easy to say, well, I'm going to sacrifice for a chapter of my life. And when we're younger, we have, if you think about the three kind of core things that all of us struggle because they're limited resources, is our time, our health, and our money. And when we're younger, we can trade some of our time, you can trade some of our health because we have a lot of it. So investing heavily in that early in our careers, where it's going to have a 20, 30, 40-year payback period for us, that can be a really good investment. But at my age now, when I'm 60, and, frankly, I'm financially independent now. So for me to sacrifice money as opposed to time or health, that would be foolish. The other thing that's very limited for me is time. But I have to sacrifice some time in order to stay healthy. Where I'm staying here, they have a nice gym. I can work out. It's a lot easier to just sit at the bar and drink a margarita and watch the sunset. And I get to do that as well. But it's also important that I take the time out of every day and I invest the time for me to do yoga. They have weights here. I can lift weights. And then beautiful to run on the beach. So those are my three core things that I try to do. The next thing, and this is going to sound weird coming from somebody that was a financial advisor, but it's important to switch from being a saver to being a spender. We spend so much of our lives sacrificing today for a better tomorrow financially, right? We work hard, we get up early, we commute, we've got a lot of responsibilities on our shoulders. And it's important that all those sacrifices that we made and the money that we put aside is going to result in us enjoying life more, and that's what I want for you. I want you to not just squeeze all the juice out of the youth of your senior years, but I want you to squeeze all the joy that you can out of the money that you've saved. And frankly, it's hard to transition from being a saver to a spender. So it's super important that we think about this ahead of time, because if we wait until the day we retire and say, okay, now I'm going to be comfortable spending money, heaven helped hundreds of people transition into retirement. I can tell you that's not how it works. It's like anything else in life. It's a muscle, and we have to flex that muscle. We have to work out that muscle. So starting that sooner rather than later is important, which is why I made this video here. 8 things to stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy your journey into retirement, which includes spending more money. I'll see you in that video. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye. The next video of mine to watch next is this one here, which talks about 8 things to stop doing in your 50s and 60s to enjoy your journey until you're actually retired. Thanks for watching this series. I hope it was super helpful. Bye-bye.